And it's the start of a new week. Hello there, you're watching The Pulse on the JoyNews channel. We're coming to you live from our studios here in Accra. This is The Pulse. Coming up, government's debt exchange program sparks more labor unrest as public sector workers fume over the likely impact of pension schemes and social security insurance being affected as a result of government's austerity plan.
My union, NAGRAT, the teacher unions will not accept this. We are members of the forum made up of the public sector unions, and we want to assure our members that we will resist this move by government.
Also this afternoon, we're paying attention to the free senior high school policy. Is it working well? Stay with us as we put a spotlight on government's flagship program, which President Akufo-Addo is describing as effective.
Yes, there have been challenges associated with this policy, for which government has addressed substantially many of them. And there will be more in the course of time.
Here from government on some of the teething challenges affecting the policy. But we talk politics. The internal race for the opposition National Democratic Congress is heating up as the days draw closer for the reorganization process of the party. We'll tell you the latest as guidelines have been outlined for the contest. It's all coming up here on The Pulse, as always brought to you by Global Communities Dignilu, Affordable Safe Sanitation. Don't forget that we're also live on DSTV channel 421, GoTV channel 144. We're streaming live on our social media handles. It's at JoyNews on TV. Feel free to be a part of the show. I'm Blessed Sogah. This is JoyNews, independent, fearless and credible journalism. Thanks for choosing us. We're back with the details shortly. And this afternoon, we talk about Ghana's economic crisis. Government's austerity plan to roll out a debt exchange program is already escalating pre-existing agitation by organized labor. Well, Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta early this morning revealed that a debt sustainability analysis points to the fact that Ghana's public debt is unsustainable. In view of this, a number of remedial steps are being taken by government, including a debt exchange program. Let's bring you key highlights of what the implication of this program will be, as announced by the Finance Minister. Here are excerpts on your screens right now in terms of what you need to know about the debt exchange program. So the key factors there on your screens. First of all, according to the Finance Minister, individual holders of domestic bonds are first of all not affected and will not lose the face value of their instruments. Beyond that as well, we know that Treasury bills are completely exempted and all holders will be paid the full value of their investments on maturity. Beyond that, government is also giving a firm assurance that there will be no haircut on the principal of bonds. We need to take a very critical look at that because there may be subsequent issues that will affect, obviously, the interest aspect. Beyond that as well, exchange for new Ghana bonds with a coupon that steps up to 10% as soon as 2025, with the first interest payment in 2024, of course, and some longer average maturity instruments will now have to setting as part of government's austerity plan. And then we also do know that when it comes to existing domestic bonds as of the 1st of December 2022, they will be exchanged for a new set of 4 bonds, which will be maturing as far as in 2027, 2029, 2032, and the extreme end will be 2037. So these are some of the key measures being rolled out by the Finance Minister, Ken Ofori-Atta. But when it comes to predetermined allocation ratio, of course, it will be as follows: 17% for short bonds, 17% for intermediate bonds, and we have 25% for medium-term bonds and a 41% for long-term bonds as well. The annual coupon on all of these new bonds, as the Finance Minister is pointing out, is being set at 0%. So the whole of 2023 will have no interest yielding on all of the investments that we're seeing. 5% may now accrue by, of course, 2024, and then eventually in 2025, you may be having some 10% on the maturity. So that's the plan government is rolling out. And they are saying all of this is happening simply because this is a key requirement to secure an IMF support. That's been settled and that's been stated by Finance Minister Ken Ofori-Atta. Well, speaking of the Finance Minister himself, he's also revealed that, of course, as part of the IMF conditionalities, government is taking some of these measures to ensure that we secure the deal.
Until maturity. Coupon payments will be semi-annual. For emphasis, this domestic debt exchange program will not affect individual bondholders. This domestic debt exchange is part of a more comprehensive agenda to restore debt and financial sustainability. We are also working towards a restructuring of our external indebtedness, which we will announce in due course. This is a key requirement to allow Ghana's economy to recover as fast as possible from this crisis. This is also a key requirement to secure an IMF support. We are confident that of the measures we are putting in place, including those outlined in the 2023 budget statement and underpinned by a successful IMF program, Ghana will witness a stable and thriving economy from 2023. We accordingly anticipate that inflation will be returned to single digits, ensuring that real return on these new bonds will be protected. As His Excellency the President declared in his address to the nation on 30th August, 30th October 2020, and I quote, "To restore and sustain debt sustainability, we plan to reduce our total public debt to GDP ratio to some 55% in present value terms by 2028. This can only be achieved through the active participation of all key economic actors. In that perspective, we call upon all domestic debt holders to take their share in ensuring that public debt sustainability is quickly restored by participating in this exchange program. Our pledge to you all is that government will take all appropriate measures to safeguard the solvency of the financial institutions involved in the exchange. Thanks to well-targeted regulatory measures and the creation of a financial stability fund, banks, pension funds, insurance companies, fund managers, and collective investment schemes will be supported to ensure that they are able to meet the obligations to their clients as they fall due. For this reason, the Governor of the Bank of Ghana will follow suit with details of the necessary assistance in due course. We have also dialogued extensively with regulators across the financial sector, including the Securities and Exchange Commission, National Insurance Commission, and the National Pensions Regulatory Authority, to agree that regulatory forbearance will be provided to all entities whose financial position is adversely affected by virtue of participating in this exchange.
And barely hours after that announcement by the Finance Minister, he's getting quite a strong reaction this time around from organized labor. We have a bit of a developing story for you on this. The Trades Union Congress, the mother body of organized labor, has just issued a statement. Let's bring you excerpts of what it is that the Trades Union Congress is talking about. Let's bring you excerpts. It indicates that the Trades Union Congress is gravely concerned about government's domestic debt exchange program launched today, December 5, 2022, because of its potential negative impact on workers' pensions. We're equally concerned about the lack of prior engagement, as organized labor is revealing for the very first time, with labor giving that substantial portion of the workers' pension is invested in government bonds. Now, they are going ahead to point out that we've taken special note of the statement by the Minister for Finance that the debt exchange program is voluntary. Of course, the TUC will scrupulously analyze the propriety, I should say, or otherwise, of the participation of pension funds of its members in the program. And then this is TUC continuing to indicate that we're assuring workers that the TUC and its affiliate unions, which includes, for instance, NAT, which held a press conference earlier today, that they will do everything in their power to ensure that members are fully protected and that not even a peso of pension funds is lost in the debt restructuring program. We're therefore appealing to all workers and unions to remain calm as we work to protect our retirement funds. On this note, I want to bring in now Bernard Ajay, who's the Secretary of the Public Sector Workers Union. That's one of the labor unions belonging to the umbrella body of TUC. Bernard, thank you for joining us. In fact, we're hearing for the very first time now that you've not been engaged ever since government planned on rolling out the debt exchange program. How true is this?
Well, thank you very much, Blessed, and good afternoon to you and all your listeners. It is as you see, and as you have rightly read, organized labor, or for that matter, the TUC, have not been properly engaged on these matters, especially regarding our pension funds being affected by these measures that government is trying to put in place. We find that very unacceptable. We find that as an insult to the dignity of workers, that with all the challenges that we are going through and the sacrifices we have made over the years to make sure that this economy gets back on track, the insensitivity of government to ensure that they even follow us and touch the meager pensions that our members are currently receiving have very much infuriated us. And as the statement has indicated, we are going to do everything in our power to ensure that not even a peso of our pension funds are made to suffer or are used for this debt exchange program.
Yeah, but I mean, to be fair to government says this is a voluntary program. What's your biggest fear as organized labor?
Well, we don't understand what they mean by voluntary because, Blessed, let's cast our mind back as to how even our funds got locked up in government bonds. When we were agitating for our pension funds to be given back to us so that our schemes could manage these funds, remember, all these funds were given to us in form of government bonds. And most of the pension funds have substantial portions of their funds in these government bonds. So realistically, we would have chosen or gone for other options on the market. So in the first place, we were forced even into these government bonds in the first place. So something like this happening and looking at sacrifices we have made, we think that at least a proper engagement to even understand how to go about this would have been appropriate. And we think that government is just going for the easier option by making workers suffer unnecessarily and unduly in all these measures. And we think that the adage that there is no alternative is not true. Government has not explored all the alternatives. And especially when it comes to pension funds, we are not going to leave any stone unturned. And we are going to resist it fiercely and make sure that our pension funds are protected.
Probably you have an idea of what the alternatives are. That's your position as trade, groups under the Trade Union Congress. What's the alternative? Because government says I'm out of options. I can't go onto the international market. I need to run this debt exchange program. You say there's an alternative. Where is that alternative really?
Well, there are a lot of alternatives, including how you spend. We've all seen the budget. We've seen the further measures, if I may describe them even as draconian measures, that are going to further worsen the plight of workers. The loans we went for, which has put us into debt, what did government use it for? What are the priorities that have been set in the budget for 2023? Why are those priorities as against workers' pension funds? Why? So I think in this country, it is time we stand up to certain things and make sure that enough is enough. Let's sit at the table and look at what is good for the country, but not what is good for a few people. And workers, after suffering, would also be punished again for this meager pension. So as for the alternatives, there are a lot of well-meaning Ghanaians since this crisis began who have also spoken on this matter. We think that when the proper engagement takes place, all the options, we put all our cards on the table. This is just a statement because of what we have heard this morning. TUC, we are meeting, and I believe that we will escalate it to all levels. We'll bring in all the necessary stakeholders in this country, and we are going to demand for a major reform and major restructuring to make sure that things are done properly, that even as we are coming out of this crisis, we don't just come out for the next government or any government that comes to just do things anyhow and make workers pay for it. So we have a number of options, and we think that at the appropriate time, we'll lay them out.
Let's talk about just snippets of that meeting. I'm sure that by now informal engagements have started because TUC is serving notice that you will protect every peswa of your members. What are you likely to do if all attempts to get an alternative doesn't work?
Well, my brother, thank you very much. We are workers. We are going to use all legitimate structures and means to make sure that our voices are heard. But of course, if reason fails to prevail, of course, we'll go back to our members. And whatever decision our members will take, including industrial action, we will take to make sure that not even a peswa of our pension funds are used in this debt measure.
Right, and finally, Bernard, this is just coming on the back of the recent agitations on the labor front. You've been asking for a 60% rise in public sector pay. Looking at what's happening now, how do you situate that in the new demand that you're going to be making, that you want to protect your pensions, whilst you also call for salary increments? The facts on the grounds are that government has no funds for you.
Well, thank you very much, my brother. It's very interesting that we are all accepting that government has no funds, but we don't have issue with the kind of expenditure they have even proposed to be doing. And no, everybody seems to accept it that it is okay. If we don't have funds, why are we thinking about cathedral? Why is cathedral a more important project? Don't we have churches that we worship in? Why are we going for things that it is after your belly is full, you satisfy your basic needs before you start thinking about? So we think that let's have a proper conversation. We think that government is committing funds to things that can hold on in terms of this crisis. But so long as government doesn't see it as something that should hold on, then our pension funds can also not go. And before I forget, our 60% still stands. And we are very genuine, we've made very genuine argument. All we are asking for the 60% or the details of the 60% is very simple. We are saying that the minimum wage should not be more than the base pay. That's all we are asking. And when we started the single spine salary structure, the base pay was 10% above the minimum wage. We are asking for that restoration. And you have given us COLA, which you are taking away in December. And we are saying that you should regularize that COLA. That is the basis of the 60%. We have not yet even really added what we should add on top. So the 60% is just the barest minimum that we can do for now. So we are still standing by our 60%. We are still indicating that the measures announced this morning, we are not going to allow even a peswa of our pension fund to go into this debt restructuring. And the earlier government sits down with us so that we put on the table what we also think should be done. And if they are not ready to listen to us, if they are not ready to sacrifice those expenditure measures, why do we still have all the ministers and the deputy ministers we have if we are struggling? Why do we have all the V8s and other things running around if we are struggling? We are not seeing much in terms of the expenditure. When we are struggling and we don't have money, rather, we are projected for an increased expenditure and an increased suffering on the ordinary worker by increasing VAT and also increasing the income tax threshold. Why are we doing this to ourselves? We are insisting we deserve the 60% we are asking for. We are also going to do anything in our rights to ensure that our pension funds are also not taken away from us. The pensioners are already suffering. That when you go into it, the tier 2 pensions that are even currently being paid are not even living up to expectation. And you further want to do this disguised haircut on our pensions. We are tired. It has gotten to our neck. We won't sit down and choke to death. We will come out and we will demand that the right thing is done. So it's up to government to do the necessary things. The proper engagements should take place. We'll lay our cards there. And if it's acceptable, we can reach a compromise and make sure that we not only bring back this country on its track, But we ensure that measures are put in place so that nobody takes us for granted.
We need to go finally in just about 30 seconds. Have you put a cost to this if government goes ahead to run the debt exchange program on potentially the number of pensioners who will be affected as members of your group?
Well, so, the announcement just came. I'm on a pension board, a public sector pensions board, and we are meeting as well. We are going to do all these assessments and see the impacts and the implications. And that is going to inform all the other actions that we are going to take between now until government rescinds its decision to add our pension funds to this restructuring. And
I'm grateful for your time now, Bernard J, General Secretary of the Public Sector Workers Union, of course, adding their voice to that of TUC, NAT and NAGRAT, I should say. That's the National Association of Graduate Teachers. Earlier today also added their voice, resenting what it is that the Finance Minister intends to do with some debt exchange program. Listen to the teachers explain their concerns.
And when the president speaks, citizens ought to take the president seriously. On Friday, which was a public holiday, the Ministry of Finance invited the fund managers of all the schemes in this country to a meeting and indicated to them the intention of government to implement this policy of reducing the values of our investment with government as a result of the economic situation we find ourselves. To slap these percentages again on our investment is shooting us with a double-barreled gun. The sad thing is that some of these bonds that have been purchased by the various schemes is as a result of government inability to have transferred funds to the various schemes on time and had to negotiate with labor to convert some of these arrears into bonds. Now that you've made us convert some of these arrears into bonds, you are now telling us that by force majeure, we will have to accept a certain percentage. Who does that? And where does that happen? I have entered into a contractual agreement with you. The contractual agreement indicates that the workers' money, and this we are talking about both private sector and public sector, because almost every worker in this country pays tier 2.
That's more from Angel Kabunu, who says that NAGRAT and other labor unions will resist government's decision with all their might and force them to reverse the decision.
My union, NAGRAT, the teacher unions will not accept this. We are members of the forum made up of the public sector unions, and we want to assure our members that we will resist this move by government. We will resist this move by government by any means necessary. That we will not accept this. No worker in this country is going to accept this. We will not, under any circumstances, be shortchanged by any government taking away poor people's monies, poor pensioners' monies. I thought that pension is a social security situation, and that every government ought to be very interested in the pensions of people. People who have worked for this country for 30 years, who have worked for this country for 40 years, now that they are becoming most vulnerable and going back to rest, we say that the monies that they have invested should be taken away just because government have failed economically. We will not accept this situation.
Well, more reactions have been greeting this because the minority in Parliament is describing as unacceptable government's decision to carry out the debt exchange program. Minority Leader in Parliament, Haruna Idrisu, earlier today addressed the media to, of course, lay out what the concerns of the minority side of the House is on these emerging matters.
Let me state without any fear of contradiction that the form and structure of the debt restructuring announced by Minister Ken Ofori-Atta is unacceptable to us, and we simply will not accept it. I shudder to ask, how come that the contours, I'm quoting him, of this debt exchange program was not announced in the budget statement that was presented to Parliament? Were investors consulted? Bondholders, were they consulted? How did he come to this conclusion? Are we not right to state that this amounts to an economic imposition against the investment intents and wishes of those who bought the bonds? So we simply, as a minority, are cautioning that government is simply breaking contracts according to the plans revealed by the finance minister this morning. These developments will deter investors without first informing and consulting them of what your plans were. The best way to manage a crisis, in our view, is to anticipate it or reduce its impact, or at best prevent it from happening. They simply failed in preventing this from happening.
Well, so that's Minority Leader Haruna Idrisu there. Let's get more on this. Joining us in studio now is Kweku Ricketts-Hagan, Cape Coast South MP and former Deputy Minister in charge of finance during the SWAL NDC administration. It's a good time to be talking to you, sir. Welcome to the polls.
Yeah, thanks a lot.
And you've watched your leader in Parliament lay out what the concerns of the minority is. What's of key or utmost concern to you as someone who's worked at the finance ministry and having looked at the program being laid out by the finance minister today? What's of key concern to you?
Thanks very much, and good afternoon to our viewers. Well, pretty much everything is of concern to me. I mean, ever since this government actually came into office, the style of doing things doesn't seem to be the norm. But then they every time try and get away with it. I mean, what is concerning about this is that the budget was presented not too long ago, where they mentioned that there's going to be a debt exchange. We thought that would have come with the details and didn't. Few days later, some details were announced at Sunday night, followed by some more on Monday morning. And it looks as if they are trying to get a debt exchange through the back door. So that's of concern.
But if you ask, the finance minister says, well, I stated it in the budget, except that it was not explicit. So I'm giving the details now of what it is I intend to do.
The question is that whatever gets agreed or whatever gets approved will have to be done in Parliament. So if you have the information, why didn't you put it in the budget? Why do you have to bring in the budget? And what are you going to do? Bring a supplementary budget? Or you are coming to, just tell us this? At the end of the day, all these things have to be approved. Now, what I do know is that, to go on a program, I'm talking about the IMF, right. To start negotiating with your creditors is when you have actually gotten a staff level agreement. But as far as I know, we haven't gotten a staff level agreement yet. So it looks as if the finance minister is just preempting things by coming up with it, because after the staff level agreement, you will need to negotiate with your creditors. I mean, has that been done? Was this figures that they've churned out done unilaterally, or was it done with the domestic creditors in this case? I mean, we were told that we should hold on, the external creditors one will come. But the domestic investors, who have you spoken to? We heard they were talking to some bankers or whatever, but it's much wider than that. We have pension fund, insurance companies, various schemes that invest in our bonds. I mean, have we spoken to all these people, and have they agreed? I mean, don't forget that the president shot himself in the foot, or the government, in the foot, from the very onset by coming out to say that there's not going to be any haircut, and then you don't go into a negotiation putting your cards on the table that there is not going to be a haircut. Now they've gone in there, and it looks as if there is a haircut.
Okay, when minority in Parliament, and we heard your leader say that we will not accept this. What's the implication?
Well, the implication, before we come to the implication, we are not accepting this because we believe that there are other alternatives to deal with the problem.
Right.
I mean, we are a country that we are spending too much money. We're not able to raise the revenue. Therefore, we are building up deficit that makes us go and borrow. And we've been borrowing, and that has brought us to this end. It looks as if this finance minister doesn't know anything other than borrowing. And then we heard him saying that he couldn't get to the financial market, the capital market again for 3 years. And he seems to be nervous about it. So it looks as if that he doesn't see any other alternative. If he can't borrow, then perhaps he needs to do this to create a space to borrow.
Okay, is that entirely the picture? Because I've read the statement from the finance minister. He points to some exogenous factors or factors that are not within necessarily government's purview, the external factors, and you've heard these arguments. COVID-19 pandemic, the Russian-Ukraine war is featuring once more in the statement of the finance minister. And he says, well, we're helpless. We need to find a way out with this austerity plan with the IMF. So it's not entirely government's fault if you say he's just borrowing his way out.
Well, don't forget we don't live on Mars. We are on planet Earth where the COVID and the Ukraine war and everything happens. I mean, how many countries are going through what we are going through? At least in Africa here, we are the only country going through this debt, type of overhang and this type of destruction we are suggesting. So that clearly tells you that.
But of course, there are some Southern African countries that are also going through the process, for instance.
Not on the same scale.
Right.
I mean, our currency is the worst currency in the world. I mean, why are the others not at the same level as us? It tells you that some economies were better planned and better prepared than us. I mean, nobody is questioning the COVID and the Russian war. But
so you accept that argument? You accept that it's a major factor that's contributing to where we are today?
I wouldn't say that it's a major factor. What I will say is that if your house is built on straw, when the storm comes, you are the one going to suffer most. And the guys who build their houses on proper bricks and mortar will still be standing. So yes, I'm saying that it had an impact. I wouldn't want to use the word major, because if you look at some of the economic indicators, inflation and others, you could see that a good chunk of it is also as a result of us not doing well with our own economy. I mean, you have food inflation. You can even look at the fuel situation and see that, well, it's exogenous. But we also benefit. We are an oil-producing nation. Therefore, if we are suffering at the pump in terms of crude prices going up, we are getting money on the other side where we are exporting crude. So why can't we use that to mitigate, the front end and just sit there and waste time for so long that now we've gotten to a situation where these things have affected inflation, it's affected the depreciation of the currency, and we are in kind of a vicious circle. Then we get a Bank of Ghana comes in and continue to aggressively put up a monetary policy that itself is creating problems through cost of lending, and eventually will get us into a recession. In addition to all the problems that we have, it tells you clearly that the managers of the economy actually don't know what they are doing.
And that's why I was asking about the implication when you say you would not accept this.
Well, what we are trying to tell them is that you could go back to the drawing board and there are other things that you can do other than coming up with this. I mean, even if you have to do this, not in this quantum. Because if you look at your expenditure and then you are doing these cosmetic cuts, 30%, that we don't even know what the quantum of those percentages that we are cutting, but we know that they don't amount to much. Then it's problematic when we have cathedral being built in the middle of a storm, and we are in a storm. You build the cathedral which is costing about 400 million. We don't have a clear line item in the budget, to deal with that. We have frivolous, wasteful expenditures. We have the central bank doing deficit financing to fund, projects that are not going anywhere. Because if the projects are going somewhere, you would have seen the result. If Planting for Food and Jobs, where we put almost about 600 million on top of the Ministry of Agriculture budget, is actually working, you would have seen that food inflation is coming down. If 1D, 1F, as they tell us that there are almost about 200 or so factories. If that is really working, you wouldn't have the unemployment situation that we have at the moment. So basically, the policies are not working, and we are not prepared to review them, but we are throwing money at them where nobody knows what the economic impact of those are. And that is why we are where we are.
In all of this, all I get from the minority argument is the simple case of cutting costs. But how far can we go in cutting the costs?
We can go as far as we want to go. Obviously, not only minority, but civil society and some experts, independent experts, have suggested that the size of government is too big. You know, we started with 120, we got no result. We brought you to, I don't know, 80 or whatever. And people are saying that, look, we could do with 30 or even less ministers. But the president or the government is reluctant to do that. Look at the presidential staffers, you know, where we spent last year, I think, 1.3 billion on them. And this, you believe that this area can be halved. There are so many things you're talking about. People should not be using four-wheel drives and all that. Who is monitoring that? If I pick my four-wheel drive and you know, I step out in the street of Accra, do you know if I'm going to my constituency in the central region or going to Parliament? I mean, so these cosmetic things that they're talking about, it's like scratching the surface of the problem, but they are not actually dealing with the problem. And that we are in a situation where clearly now our debt is not sustainable. I think they've come around to accept, because initially there were some kind of a dancing around, even with the IMF, that we need to do debt sustainability analysis and all that. Now it is clear that Ghana's debt is unsustainable. Ghana is actually insolvent, technically. You know, when your debt to GDP is almost over 100, you are insolvent.
What do you say to someone or critics who say you're setting double standards? At the time the NDC was taking us to the IMF, there were conditionalities. We're debt distressed. You had to take some cost-cutting measures at the time. Now our debt is unsustainable. And the only examples that we've seen around the world is that obviously this is the way we're going. We need to restructure our debt. So if that's the case and government is pursuing that, why have an issue with it? Why not support government just to ensure that, first of all, we get out of the woods? You're setting double standards, aren't you?
But you know clearly that our issue is not about, it's not about IMF. I think we were the first to be talking about going to the IMF when the government actually told us that they are not going to IMF today or tomorrow, and that we are a proud nation and we can deal with the problem. When clearly we could see that IMF probably is the best path to go. So the issue here is about decision making. It's about bad policies. It's about not understanding the economy that they are managing. And that is why we are asking the likes of the finance minister to leave the scene, to give the opportunity, hopefully for somebody else to come and start us afresh.
Since you're raising that point, of course, the minority leader himself was part of those who mooted the idea, and then we got to the level of having a vote of a motion of censure.
Yeah.
We've not heard anything in the last few days after the expiration of the 7-day window given by the Speaker of Parliament.
Yeah.
Would you say that, giving the admission that the Finance Minister has done today, that we're at very unsustainable levels in terms of our public debt, you're reinforcing the calls for him to step down now?
Absolutely, absolutely. And then, you know, it's a process. We haven't come to the end of the process, neither have we abandoned it. But
it's not a case that you're relaxed about it, because that's the approach. That's what we see from the outside, that the minority is no longer interested in.
Quite a number of things going on at the moment, mainly to do with the budget. I mean, I'm sure very soon we'll come to that. But then, of course, we've got to do things, you know, following a proper system, not to you know, jeopardize certain things. Okay, but of course, if we had got our brothers and sisters on the other side to really, you know, talk the talk and walk the walk, we probably wouldn't be here getting the finance minister even to read the budget in the first place. But then, of course, they made a decision, and then God knows what happened with businessmen and other people arriving in Parliament, and all of a sudden meeting up with the president, and the position has changed. I mean, the guy who has brought us where we are is the guy who is supposed to restore the economy, the guy who doesn't believe in the IMF, and probably the feeling is mutual, that the IMF also don't believe in him, that he's committed enough to carry out.
That's your suspicion?
That's my suspicion. It is obvious that if you don't like somebody and you make it so obvious that you don't like the person, then you might force the person to more or less, you know, reciprocate on that. So if I'm sitting down negotiating with you, but I know that you don't believe in whatever I'm doing with you, but then you are forced to do it, the chances are you're not going to do a good job. And then secondly, if your president has hinted, your members of parliament, that let the gentleman finish the negotiation and then we'll see what to do with him, you wouldn't feel comfortable negotiating with such a person, because the person you are negotiating with might not be the person who will end up implementing what he's agreeing on. So what about if a new finance minister comes in? Yes, government is binding, but a new finance minister comes in and say the deal is not a good one, right, and therefore he needs to renegotiate it. Where does that leave you? So the IMF itself doesn't sit comfortably. They were supposed to be here some time ago. They didn't come. They showed up
recently.
So that tells you that they are getting a cold feels like a marriage they don't want to enter. But for some reason, I don't know whether it's out of pity or whatever, they still want to marry us.
I've heard the ranking on the Finance Committee in Parliament, Dr. Tuforson, talk about the fact that as part of the remedial measures, Ghanaians must help the NDC come to power and to vote out the NPP. I don't intend to do politics on this, but if we're to turn the tables around and to have the NDC, of course, in charge of the economy now, the NPP believes it would have been worse.
Well, that is their belief, or I don't know if it's their wish. But then I would rather they focus on turning the economy around, because they are holding the steering wheel now. It's not us. We are just supporting them, to get the Ghana vehicle to a proper destination. So, to say that based on what? We have made very solid suggestions as to the direction that the economy should go. They just haven't listened. Well, we are telling them that seriously, you can cut the expenditure, because look, we make estimates, that is revenue estimates, that are really not realistic, that are not achievable. It's good to be ambitious, but you have to be realistic. So we set all these targets, and the reason why we do it is we want to suppress the deficit. So if you set up a very high expenditure revenue target, then you are likely to match it with also a much higher expenditure. Okay, you may show a much smaller deficit than it should be, but don't forget that accumulation of your deficit, it what gives you your debt. Therefore, if you suppress your deficit, then the chances are you are going to finance it with a smaller borrowing, but yet you end up with below the line items and all those things, which itself you go behind the scene to finance them. So in the end, your projections will not match your reality, because your deficit will end up being bigger than it is. But in projection, you try to meet the Fiscal Responsibility Act. So this is why, because if you look at Ghana and you say, look, if these guys, put COVID aside, if these guys have really been scoring the deficit that they've been showing us, why is it that our debt is so much? Because you use your debt to finance your deficit. So if your deficit is as slim as they have shown us, you would have thought that your borrowing wouldn't also be that much. So there's a clear mismanagement, and it's either they don't understand the economy, or they're out of their debt with it. And the earlier the finance minister goes, the better. And then many others will follow, like the central bank governor, the chairman of the EMT, who is now a missing person in all this. The man who's been lecturing all across the country is now cannot be found. He's been found. Are
you sure the vice president cannot be found?
Well, not in these matters. He's doing digital work, I believe, which is not what I think he went to school for. But that's what he has, chosen to do now. But we are not hearing him in times of crisis, where the whiz kid or whatever he is as an economist, we can't hear from him. And we also hearing that he said they are not giving him an opportunity. The number 2 man on the land. It's just ridiculous. But we are in serious situation now. Very, very serious situation. And for me personally, I am a bit concerned, because we are trying to do the right thing, but time is also not on our side. Right. Because if we don't get IMF program or whatever, since this is the only way the only tunnel these guys could see, then the question becomes that if we don't get a program, then what happened? Because they don't seem to know any any other option.
Right,
But
big
there
question
are
you're
options,
asking there.
and that is
So we need to go, but what would be your message to your constituents and the entire populace watching us now about the future of Ghana's economy?
Well, let's put pressure. This government has got 2 more years to go. You know, if democracy is going to take its course, and we all want to live in democracy, then one of the things I want all of Ghana to support us in doing is to force this government to change course. And by cutting our quota according to our size, cutting expenditure seriously, cut off all the wasteful expenditures, the frivolous flying of private jet, and then people are talking to the president and he's not listening, and he thinks he can do whatever he wants. And that's the problem that we're in at the moment. We have ministers who are not even interested in the very budget that they have put together in cabinet, and they prefer to go, you know, and do other things elsewhere. So these guys are not serious, but you know, sometimes you can become not serious, if I can put it that way, if you really don't know what to do. So you pretend as if you don't want to do anything, but really, the truth of the matter is that you really don't have an idea what to do. And I think personally, I think that's where they are. If you look at the economics, I always tell people that if you don't understand economics and finance in this country today, you are probably better off, because you can close your mind and think that when they say things will get better. But if you look at the real numbers and look at where we are going, my brother, it's really scary. And if something is not done, you know, we could be at the tip of the cliff.
Well, we're hoping for the very best, but we're grateful for your time.
I don't want to be a prophet of doom.
Yeah, you don't have to be. Not at all. Let's be optimistic
but
about the Ghanaian economy.
I also have to be realistic and speak the truth on what I see.
Let's see what the future holds. George Ricketts Hagan, MP for Cape Coast South, and also a former Deputy Finance Minister, joining us here on The Pulse. When we return, we'll talk about the free senior high school policy. The president says it's working well, but truly, what's really effective about the free senior high school policy? We'll do that after this break. Welcome back to The Pulse. Now, President Akufo-Addo is stoking a fresh debate as he claims that the free senior high school policy is, quote, working and working very well. In the last few weeks, heads of government-assisted senior high schools have called for a reform to government's flagship policy, especially with regard to dealing with issues surrounding food shortages on campus. Other stakeholders, including the minority in Parliament, have also pointed to pressure on school facilities as part of the reason for which the program cannot be described as successful. But speaking over the weekend, President Akufo-Addo says the results of the 2022 batch of students who wrote the West Africa Senior Secondary Certificate Examination, WACC, produced the best results in the last 8 years, a situation which is indicative that the free senior high school policy is successful.
According to the president, 1.3 million children have benefited from the free SHS policy, which comes with its own challenges. He enumerated some successes chalked with respect to the examination results of some beneficiaries.
I can state without equivocation that I'm very proud of the policy and of its results thus far. Yes, there have been challenges associated with this policy, for which government has addressed substantially many of them. And there will be more in the course of time. Such is the nature of social evolution, so that at every stage, the challenges will be met. Lest we forget, the 2021 batch of students who also obtained very commendable results were the pioneers of the double-track system, which elicited a lot of vilification and unfounded criticism on its introduction. Indeed, the pass rate in the free senior high school era has seen systematic improvements over the pre-free senior high school era. And the 2022 results are the best of the last 8 years. Surely, There can no longer be any controversy about the validity of the free senior high school policy and its consequential measures. It is working and working well.
In spite of current economic challenges, budgetary allocation for the policy implementation has increased from 2.3 billion cedis to 2.96 billion cedis. The president has called for support in the implementation of outlined policies of the government.
That in spite of the economic difficulties confronting our nation, government has devoted even more resources for the running of the free senior high school policy. From a budget of 2.3 billion cedis in 2022, a 28.6% increase has been applied to this year's budget for free SHS, i.e. 2.96 billion cedis.
So in spite of these challenges, why is the president insisting that the free senior high school policy is effective? Yao Pokumensa is a spokesperson at the Ghana Education Service, the Ministry of Education, I should say, joins us now via Zoom. Thank you, sir, for your time. So we know that, of course, Charles has been making some passionate calls about the free senior high school policy. One of them has got to do with even challenges regarding food shortage on campus. So if you're describing a policy as successful, why do that only on the score of the academic results?
Good afternoon to yourself and to our lovely viewers. The success of the program can only be measured based on the outcome of the implementation of the policy within a certain time frame. Now, to measure the success of the academic work within our space, what you should realize is that you can only evaluate it after the summative evaluation assessment test has been done. And the summative evaluation assessment test is the WASI result that we are discussing. And a critical analysis of the result points to a certain direction. And that direction determines whether if you are on track, you are achieving the benchmark that you set for yourself, or you need to beef up your performance, or you are not doing well at all. And that can only be known within the result which comes out at the end of the day. And that is why the president is right when he says that free SHS is a game changer. And the transformation that we seek for has got to do with our ability to increase our gross tertiary enrollment ratio. And we can only do that when we see quality passes within the WASI result that comes out every year. And judging from the first batch of free SHS in 2020 up to date, it gives you a certain percentage that are able to access tertiary education, and that is 60% plus, of which for the past 8 years, a careful analysis of the result tells you that this year is the best result that we've seen within the past 8 years.
Yeah, that's not under contention. This is an academic result. I guess if the experts are talking about the quality of a particular policy, they would not just be relating this to, the type of results we get at the end of a certain examination, which is waxy. Is it just the case of passing exams and not looking holistically at the challenges that we have even within the schools themselves?
What we need to understand is that all policies and programs, all what government is doing, should cumulatively translate into the results that you see at the end of the day. Now, for example, if government investment in free SHS coupled with these challenges come out at the end of the day that 29% of our candidates are able to access tertiary education, then the answer obviously would be that scrap free SHS. It is not giving us the dividend that we are looking for. So that is the only means that government can measure the success of its program. And government has measured the success of its program using the summative evaluation approach. How then do we measure the success of the program if we don't evaluate the outcomes? And that is why it's important that you situate the conversation within a certain context. Be it the challenge, challenges are bound to happen. but you look at all the investment and you look at the end product at the end of the day. And the end product is telling you that per the policy that you are implementing, per the investment that you are doing, it gives you a benchmark value which is above 60% plus accessing tertiary education. Then it tells you the policy is good. It tells you the policy need to be maintained. It tells you the policy need to be beefed up so that you can even do 70% plus. And I think that whoever want to be fair to the system will have to situate the context within the learning outcomes.
For some,
that should be the point of discussion.
For some, what it is that the president is doing is that he's simply sweeping away the criticism, genuine ones, of course, and challenges affecting the policy under the carpet, simply because we have, by far, one of the best WASI results in the last 8 years. That's not the best way of assessing a policy, is it?
No, the president never said that. There's nothing like a perfect system. All systems will have challenges. It's got to do with your ability to be able to deal with the challenges. And I believe where you are leading us towards has got to do with the food challenges that you want to situate it within the context of the quality outcome that we've seen. But again, in terms of all the challenges that you may mention, you will ask yourself, what was the outcome at the end of the day? And again, you ask yourself, was government able to put up a solution to that challenge? And what has been the net effect of the challenge or the solution that government offered? The net effect of the solution that government offered has got to do with the pass rate that we are discussing, where 63.94%.
Yeah, you're being repetitive on that point. There are key concerns also about food shortage. I'm not sure that you just want to have a 9-day wonder, have a few set of people pass the examination very well, and after a few more years, you're not getting the quality of education you want. So you can't sweep away the issues of infrastructure, food shortage, which you're just talking about. As we speak, Charles, for instance, is asking you to review how much you give in terms of the feeding to 10 Ghana cities. These are issues confronting the policy.
But again, I think we shouldn't allow the challenges that you are mentioning to overcrowd the success of this year's WASI result. I think we need to be celebrating CHART. We need to be celebrating our teachers. We need to be celebrating policymakers for giving us this wonderful performance. In the absence of free SHS, we're doing below 40%. In the presence of free SHS, coupled with the challenges that you are mentioning, we are doing 63.94%. It is a plus that we need to encourage policymakers and policy implementers to do more. We are not sweeping the challenges under the carpet. We wouldn't do that. The challenges always stare us in the face. It's got to do with our ability to map up strategies to arrest these challenges. And as we speak, I've never, and I keep telling you this, we've never had a report from any school that just a single day our students or learners were unable to go for breakfast, lunch, or supper. 3 times a day they are fed. We get to hear of some of these issues when it is getting to the latter end where their items are being out of stock, or 1 or 2 items are out of stock. But that does not mean that the policy is a bad policy. The policy with this challenge should lead us to a certain angle. The angle that the policy has led us to is a positive outcome, positive learning outcome that we need to celebrate and encourage ourselves to do more. That is why the president will want to call on stakeholders to rally support behind the policy and ensure that we even up our game from that 63.94% to about 70 or 80% for people to be able to access tertiary education. And for me, we're celebrating policymakers, we're celebrating policy implementers. Again, we need to celebrate this result, and we need to encourage ourselves to do more and do better than what we are seeing this year, or what we've seen this year. So the challenges are there, we all know it. Government, day in and day out, tells the good people of Ghana how he's dealing with these challenges. And as we speak, we are not hearing of these challenges. But as and when it comes, we will confront it. But all the investment, all the solutions that will be offered the challenge should lead to a better learning outcomes. And that is what we are celebrating, and that is what we've seen within this academic year. And I think we all Ghanaians need to encourage ourselves and need to celebrate this result and urge others to follow suit so that we can even cross the 70-80 mark that we want to get to.
Okay, by the way, what's the next target? What's the next target for the Ghana Education Service, by extension the Ministry of Education?
What we are looking at is not to drop the outcomes, and these outcomes tells about the quality access within our education space. And I define quality education as creating a conducive atmosphere for teaching and learning, devoid of all intimidation and what have you. So if there is a conducive atmosphere for teaching and learning, what it means is that we should maintain these numbers and even increase it. And Free SHS has proven that. In 2020, 60% of our candidates were able to access or had the requisite pass mark to access quality education using the core subject. In 2021, 59.8%, and in 2022, 63.94%. It tells the quality is maintained and it is even edging up. And therefore, the aspect of these challenges shouldn't crowd the effect of what we are seeing.
I get
Free
the point
SHS must be maintained. It should be sustained, where all policy or all well-meaning Ghanaians need to rally support behind government and urge government to do more.
Yeah, Opokumensa, we're grateful that you've been able to join us here on The Pulse. Let's do politics now. Chairperson of the NDC Central Planning Committee for its 10th National Delegates Congress, Alex Segwefia, says the party is unperturbed about the seeming political bickering ahead of its internal elections scheduled for next week, Saturday. Speaking at a news briefing at the party's headquarters, he stated every election is characterized by squabbles, but the ultimate goal is to rally all together for victory after the polls.
I have not yet come across an election that doesn't, in terms of political positions in Ghana, that doesn't raise some level of rancor or some agitation. But the important thing is to be able to, it comes with the space. And the important thing is how you deal with issues after the election, not so much during the run-up to the elections. A lot of these things are what we say par for the course. And it will happen and has happened continuously over the years. But once it's over, we are one political party. We'll come together and ensure that we wrestle power from the current incumbent government. Don't forget that elections are a beautiful thing, and that's what democracy is about. One day you are in, the next day you are out. Sometimes you stay a bit long, sometimes you don't. So let us all understand that much as you may see things on platforms, and I always tell people that the advent of social media has changed the way we actually get information and deal with it. So things that you would never have heard of, that occurred in the past, now the moment it's said, you hear that very moment. So all of a sudden it becomes big news. We are not in the least perturbed. We are focused. We'll go for the election. After that, we will ensure that we are ready for the main election, which is the 2024 election. And no doubt, NDC will be in power in 2025. Moving swiftly on, the 10th National Delegate Congress takes place a week after the Women and Youth, on the 17th of December 2022, which is also a Saturday. And it takes place at the Accra Sports Stadium. The venue was chosen because of the numbers that are involved in our Congress. The Grounds and Accommodation Committee have laid out plans to ensure that all delegates and guests are well seated and the party hosts a successful conference or congress. A Congress delegate village is being established at the University of Ghana, Legon, which will accommodate delegates the night before on the Friday, to ensure that all delegates are then bused to the Congress ground on time so that we do not have the unfortunate delays that sometimes occur on these occasions. Therefore, the delegates will arrive on the 16th of December, that is the Friday evening, at Legon. The number of delegates expected for the main Congress is 8,964. 8,964. And that is what we are expecting. Both the conference and the Congress are in two parts. You have the opening ceremony, and then you have the voting process, which is conducted on both occasions by the Electoral Commission. The second phases will commence immediately after the ending of the first introductory phases. The Congress Planning Committee has been working with the Election Committee, and it intends and has drawn up plans to ensure that we have elections that can be finished in a day. And for those of you who remember 4 years ago, this is quite important. In that vein, we are looking to set up 17 different polling stations to cater for 16 regions in a way and manner and a configuration that will allow multiple voting simultaneously to ensure that we finish in a good couple of hours. This, we hope, will improve the voting process, conclude voting in good time, and ensure that we can all possibly get to our beds much earlier than we did 4 years ago. The only accredited media will be permitted into the media zone to rest assured that a delegate list has gone out. There's nothing like a perfect list. So please scrutinize it. If there are issues you have with the delegates list, especially for the aspirants, make it known as soon as possible. We have made it available for both the women and youth as well as the main Congress. Do not come and give us an injunction on the day when you've had all this time to rectify any issues you feel are necessary. Because most of the time, some of these things can be dealt with very quickly ahead of time, as opposed to leaving it to the last moment. And that is why the delegates list has been sent out, so that these issues can be rectified and we can have a smooth Congress on the day.
Also, these are some of the updates we're getting, but when it comes to party executives taking sides and endorsing candidates, he equally indicated that it is good to shape the opinion of party's delegates, as he urged his other colleagues to also make their stance known.
I think that is something, as a practice we have to encourage, because party executives are stakeholders. Why do you want to keep quiet when you clearly have a choice and your voice can influence delegates?
What do you make of some party executives endorsing, some candidates in this election? Some may say that, okay, maybe it's not explicitly stated in your party constitution, but morally, don't you see anything wrong with it? Party executive endorsing candidates?
Because we have worked with all the people.
Don't you think your voice can also influence the electoral process?
No, it cannot, because we are not the ones organizing the election. I mean, it can only influence the process if if we are the ones managing the electoral process. No, we have no hands with the electoral process. Electoral Commission is doing that. Our voice is supposed to influence positively. What we are saying is that I think other executives must declare their stance. But we are one people. It strengthens the internal democracy. Even though I'm campaigning for, or I'm even the spokesperson for Honorable Johnson Asedu Nketia, the Honorable Fosampopo is not an enemy. When I see him, I still give him his due respect as our national chairman and as a father figure to someone like me. And so the fact that I'm not supporting him does not mean that I hate him or have anything personal against him. And so other national executives, I believe, should be freely coming out, declaring their stance, and let's strengthen our internal democracy together. That is the only way we can get people at the grassroots level to participate in the process without fear or favor.
And there's a lot more happening on the governing NPP side because the party wants to break the tradition of the maximum 8 years of an administration in Ghana and have been vigorously preparing for that ahead of the 2024 general elections. Now, 4 names have come up. Of course, the Vice President, Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. We have Trades Minister Alan Kojo-Kyerematen, and some more names coming up, including the likes of Greek Minister Dr. Osu Koto Efriye. Names have also come up, including the likes of business mogul Kennedy Ejapong. Now, the biggest fallout through this is that we have the big exchange of fire between the businessman and Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia. Of course, that's becoming deep-seated within the governing New Patriotic Party, where, of course, the businessman, Kennedy Ejapong, is claiming that the Vice President appears to be incompetent and should be pulled out of the race. So let's speak to political marketing strategist with the University of Ghana Business School, Dr. Kopi Mensah. Thank you for joining us. Let's start off with the campaign and how it's going on within the governing New Patriotic Party side as well. We see candidates seeking to lead the party, but what's happening is that they seem to be attacking each other. And this time around, the economic crisis is even becoming a campaigning point for some of the candidates. Will that not destroy the party's chances going into the next elections?
All right, yes, thanks for having me. I think that as we clearly outlined, there seems to be a trilogy of problems that the party is currently facing. Obviously, in Parliament, you have a significant number of the parliamentarians demanding a certain action from the president. Of course, we know that in the party itself, the race towards leadership or the flag bearership of the party has been a very heated one. Then, of course, from the governance perspective, you have quite a number of issues which currently we're dealing with, economic issues we're dealing with. So there's a significant issues facing the party, which of course would have a lot of impact in terms of the campaigning, whether they would have a very sound positioning, going forward or not. It's something that is clear to us. And somehow it's also affecting, the campaigning positioning of the people who are actually seeking to become flag bearers. As we heard, Honorable Kennedy Ejapong going after the Vice President that he's incompetent. Obviously, it's coming from a position that whatever he actually promised that he can do had actually failed and has actually sent us to this economic, doldrums. So I think that is having a huge impact, on the positioning of the parties or the candidates who are actually seeking to lead the party.
And now, for the Vice President himself, has been described as someone who's not able to manage the economic crisis well. He says, well, I'm not entirely in charge. Will that convince the delegates within the party?
I doubt if that would have any impact in terms of convincing the delegates, because obviously everybody knows that the Vice President was touted as the economic, was the Adam Smith, for example. He was touted as such. And then, of course, the President gave every indication that the Vice President was fully in charge of the economic issues. So for the team or the Vice President team, but I haven't actually heard it from the Vice President. Of course, we've heard rumors of him saying that, he's not in charge or he's not fully in charge, which we cannot currently attribute to the Vice President because we haven't actually heard from him. But there's a rumor that a team is claiming that he's not fully in charge. But that would be very less convincing because the President gave every indication that indeed the Vice President was fully in charge of the economic management
Doc, now looking at the outlook, would you say that the NPP has a greater chance of breaking the 8?
Can you come again?
In terms of breaking the 8, that's the mantra. Will that happen?
Of course, I couldn't actually put a verdict on that because we always have to wait until elections. As we always say, a week, towards a week in politics is quite a long time. But clearly, the evidence, as we're seeing now, with the economic issues that we're facing now, should elections be conducted today, it's everybody's guess. I mean, I couldn't actually tell you what the position would be. But if you look at the economic conditions that people are facing, the social issues, etc., I don't think that anyone would actually argue the position that if the election should be held today, the party will lose, certainly.
I'm grateful for your time, Dr. Kobina.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you for joining us. Let's take you to some other parts of the country. The northern part is where we're focusing because the Minister for Agriculture is on a tour to the northern parts of the country. He's currently speaking in the Upper West region. We can now bring you some live pictures as we have it coming through from there, where, of course, he's been assessing some of the farms up north in the wake of food inflation. He's been targeting some new figures to try and bid down the price of food and other items on the market. We'll get all of that for you when we return from this break. Please stay. And as I was indicating earlier, Minister for Agriculture, Dr. Osofriye, has been touring parts of the northern region, assessing, of course, the country's food security situation. We can now listen to excerpts of a statement he's been delivering after today's tour.
Figures here actually confirm the reports that we get from this region. That because of the shortage of fertilizer and the very high price of retail fertilizer prices, farmers were not able to apply inorganic fertilizer. As a result, they just didn't sit there and fold their arms. They decided to switch to other crops. You can see the decline in the acreage of maize and a substantial increase in the price in the acreage of soya. It's very simple for those of you who are not in our trade. Soya is a nitrogen-fixing plant, and so is groundnut and others in that family of plants. So they don't need much inorganic fertilizer, and farmers are aware of that. This is why they have moved in droves away from maize, which requires a lot of inorganic fertilizer, to soya, which naturally fixes the soil, makes the soil better. And in fact, you could say that it's like an organic treatment of the soil. Unfortunately, as we saw, mechanization has failed soya in the sense that you have these huge men with sticks beating the harvest, which is something that I thought we had gone by 30, 40, 50 years ago. So we are aware of the constraints. See, soya is like cocoa. You can't eat it in the house. It's a commercial commodity. And Ghana has the huge potential to produce and export. And you may not know, but soya has more value than maize. So for the same sweat, you can get more money as a farmer from soya than from maize. And what is happening with this shortage of global fertilizer, inorganic fertilizer, is that it's helping the farmers actually to switch to something in terms of our diversifying our grain portfolio in this region and in the whole Savannah region. What we have to do is to make sure that we give them the tools to do that, mechanization. Unfortunately, the variety of soya we have has a very short stem. So if you put a harvester is going to crush it into the soil. So the Brazilians have a variety which has a very long neck, long stem, and is very amenable to mechanization. I know that the Sari is also doing some research to come up with a variety which will have a long stem so that it will be amenable to mechanization. In the meantime, government is doing whatever we can to bring in machinery. So as we speak, over the last 6 months or so, we've been clearing machinery from the port from Brazil, including harvesters, highly electronic, latest technology. We have to actually train people to be able to manage those machinery. So that, including the other things, we are hoping that we'll be able to bring up, especially you're talking about Atika and the others who are in commercial farming. I want to have a little meeting with you after this to see, because I've spoken to people, SAPIP beneficiaries in Tamale, who have these mechanical harvesters, and in addition to what we are clearing from the ports. So we are supporting the production of soya, which will also help us in as much as we are also doing the tree crops. You know that when it comes to the tree crops, in this area, cashew and shea are the 2 crops that out of the 6, he mentioned 7, yes, including coffee, but in the Act, coffee is still with Ghana Cocoa Board for Development. And we've seen the response that
for agriculture there, addressing some measures being taken to deal with food inflation and also raking some forex through cash crops. Let's stay on the agric sector, this time around on industrialization, because residents of Asante-Achim North constituency in the Ashanti region have expressed disappointment in their Member of Parliament over claims of a functioning plantain processing factory in the area. Andy Epiakubi, during a parliamentary debate, claimed that the factory was already exporting plantain to Canada in defense of government's 1D, 1F initiative. Nana Wachianum visited the community and reports that the factory is defunct.
We have taken advantage of the internal markets.
The Member of Parliament for the Asante-Achim North constituency defended the benefits of the government's One District, One Factory initiative during a debate on the 2023 budget on the floor of Parliament. He touted the initiative as one having provided the source of livelihood for Ghanaians, especially his constituents.
In my own constituency, Asante-Achim North, and in Agugo, to be specific, we have a factory that is processing plantain. Myself, I'm a plantain farmer, so I discharge plantain to the factory, and it is onwardly exported to Canada.
The Asante-Achim area is one of the leading plantain processing communities in Ghana. However, farmers, traders and residents of Agugu say they are yet to see any plantain processing factory in operation.
I have seen the plantain factory, though it has been covered by weed. There is nothing like processing going on. Plantain is even expensive, and I doubt it would be if we had a factory here. If we had a factory indeed, I doubt farmers will be suffering. He is not telling the truth. There is no processing factory in operation.
Asante-Achim is very, very well known in the production of plantain. But then the factory that was commissioned about 3 to 4 months ago by government to enable the youth in the production of plantain sits amongst weeds. Now we battle the claims of Honorable Member of Parliament as we see this factory idle. It sits in abundance. The Municipal Chief Executive Officer Francis Oti-Boateng also cited the factory which sits in weeds.
For the first phase is done. The first phase is about the construction of the factory, of the building. and the technical handover has been done. The contractor has handed over the keys to the assembly, which is in our possession at the moment. But we're waiting for the processing machine, which we know that will be coming very soon, maybe by February next year. If you go to the station, sometimes some of the products goes bad because the warehouse is not ready and the processing factory is also not ready.
He is clueless of plantain processing for export.
Actually, we are exporting plantain, that is the raw plantain, but as for the processed plantain, we are yet to start the production.
As a member of parliament, you should have known that the factory is not in Agugu.
The former DC, who is into a private plantain biscuit processing, says there is no such plantain processing factory in the constituency. He further explained how the government and the One District One Factory Secretariat failed to fund his projects.
In fact, we sent a proposal to the One District One Factory Secretariat when Honorable Ohini Kunadu was in charge at that time. In fact, they accepted the project as a viable project. So we were given a letter to Exim Bank for assistance. The assistance in terms that when they give you a loan, the government will pay 50% of the interest for you to also pay 50%. But since 2019, that we submitted our documents to Exim Bank, as we speak now, not a penny been given to us.
Reporting for Joy News, Nana Boachi Dankwa Yadom.
And Joy News is yet to get a response from the Member of Parliament in question. Now, Director of African Studies Centre at the Oxford University, Professor Miles Lemaire, says a major way of ensuring optimal benefit of the mineral resources on the African continent is through corporate social responsibility. The University of Oxford, in partnership with the Ghana Gold Expo, is seeking to drive a framework geared towards promoting corporate social responsibility in mining companies. Speaking in an interview ahead of a workshop, the Oxford University professor indicated that there is no better time than now for a push for corporate social responsibility agenda.
Everyone knows that the vast majority of Africa's mineral resources, the continent is hugely rich in gold, in copper, in cobalt, in other minerals. And for a century, those resources have flowed out of Africa. Africans have seen very little benefit, either at a government level or at a community level. We think that corporate social responsibility provides one good avenue to ensure that more of the resources produced by African minerals and African communities stays on the continent. So Oxford University's African Studies Centre, of which I'm the director, is collaborating now with Ghana Gold Expo in a workshop to explore what is being done in corporate social responsibility, good practice, but also sometimes its limitations, to hope to improve that. So we've brought experts from Oxford, most of whom are themselves African, Ghanaian, Burkinabe, Zambian, to learn about practicing corporate social responsibility and to try and find ways to influence and to encourage good corporate social responsibility. That means paying taxes and royalties, but it also means investing in the communities that produce gold and are affected by gold production. Corporations in Africa have responsibilities for communities in every sector, in banking, in finance, in industry. But mining has historically been an area of particular exploitation. Mineral resources have often been smuggled out of the country, they can be easily manipulated, and Africa is, of course, particularly rich in minerals. But mining in Africa, unlike in other parts of the world, hasn't always led to industrialization. We don't see mining-based secondary industry that can add value. We don't see enough refining, for example, of these minerals on the continent itself. So the wealth can easily be extracted, and we've got a model historically where that wealth is extracted. So mining is really an obvious area that Africa is really strong in, but has never seen that benefit. So I think it's a particular focus. It's not unique, but it is a very particular focus where if we can ensure that more of the wealth stays in Africa, it can then provide the basis for industrialization, development, job creation, wealth creation, and addressing some of those inequalities that exist both within African countries and between Africa and the wider world. I think at the moment there's a greater sense than ever in the world that corporations must benefit the communities in which they operate. Gold mining in particular provides an opportunity to do that. Wealth is produced, and companies have moved in that direction through campaigning, through civil society at a local level here in Ghana, on an international scale. Governments have become more committed to ensuring that that happens. But a lot of those commitments are still on paper. So we want to see, I think that those sort of paper commitments provide a real opportunity for a deepening of those processes. So it is a timely moment to really push for CSR to be deepened and made more.
Well, the Executive Director of Gold Ghana Expo, Dr. Stephen Blesson-Aka, has been explaining the rationale behind the collaboration with the Oxford University and how the nation stands to benefit.
Ghana Gold Expo is an international platform that connects and collaborates with various key stakeholders in the mining sector. So we decided that we are bringing Oxford University together because we want to bridge the academia and the technicality in mining. So this is why we decided that we collaborate with Oxford to look at one of the key areas in terms of the investment agreement between the mining companies and how royalties are being managed by the government of Ghana. Oxford has the leadership program that is organized mostly between Oxford and a lot of African leaders. And they approach us, actually we didn't approach them, they approach us, and they saw the work that Ghana Gold Expo is doing, and also the synergy that we brought around the government key stakeholders. And they said, why not? This is what they want to do. They want to come into the country to understand more of royalty programs, corporate social responsibility, and therefore they see that they can work with Ghana Gold Expo to make this happen. So at the end of the day, they will be able to have a common understanding and also to pledge on how to support the host communities in the mining sector. I think so far we have the top 6 mining companies coming for the workshop, so it's good for us. Also, we have the support of the Ministry of Finance, because the Ministry of Finance mostly manages the royalties, and also have the Minerals Income Investment Fund that are like the custodian of the royalties. So it's good that we have these two, and we are hoping that we'll come to understand it to have a common platform so that the money that or the support that we receive from these mining companies we will distribute a way to support the Ghanaian, the ordinary Ghanaian that is on the street. Because more often we have more than 60 mineral resources, but we all know that we are not seeing the benefit. So we are hoping that this workshop is going to open doors for the mining company to have a full understanding on how to give back, and also for how government can also distribute these returns to the people in Ghana.
Other stories. Years ago, she began the journey of realizing her dream of becoming an officer with one of Ghana's security agencies. But that dream was cut short after she was diagnosed with HIV. Gifty Tokono was sacked against medical advice and had to face the world all alone with her 9-year-old daughter. In the following report, Ernest Menu of our help desk tells the story of how a single mother living with HIV/AIDS dedicated her life inspiring hope and campaigning against stigma.
16th April will forever be etched in the mind of Gifty Tokono. She received news that changed the entire course of her life.
The school organized the blood donation to Kolebu Blood Bank. So a week or two later, our then director of study ordered all of us who could not donate to avail ourselves for sugar diabetes test, which we all avail ourselves. So when the result came out, I was told I was not having diabetes. But he asked me not to go. I should wait because we were called to the administration. I didn't know what he was going to tell me, but I waited. So when everybody left, he called me back into the office. When I entered the office, he wasn't there alone. He was there with another officer. And she just threw it into my face that, Gifty, I'm sorry to tell you you have HIV.
She was utterly devastated. Gifty was only 6 weeks away from graduation that would see her start her life as an officer with one of the security agencies. But that dream never materialized when the security agency informed her that they cannot employ her because of her HIV status.
So I decided to confirm it. So I chose police hospital. So after the test, she told me that, Gifty, you tested positive, my brother. It was eclipse of the sun. I wept, I don't know how many buckets of water that I got tears. So she allowed me to, she asked me to flow. I cried, and when I was okay, she gave me the post-test counseling. But then there was nothing like antiretroviral. So all she told me is that I should just eat well because there's no medicine. She gave me 2 envelopes. So this is your result. It's yours. Don't give it to anybody. But take this envelope and give to them. I don't know what was in the envelope. Whether she's asking them to sack me, I don't know. So out of curiosity, I opened the envelope on the way. And she wrote, the statement was long, but 19 years now, what I can remember is that the end tail of the letter, she said, our client is strong and healthy. Don't do anything stupid to her. She used the word stupid. So I said, okay, since she's not asking them to sack me, then I have the room to go back. So I got to the school, my colleagues were in the classroom because I went a day after they reported. So when I immediately got into the training school, he spotted me. So he asked me to follow him to the office. I did follow him, and what he told me was that order from above said you should go home. On what basis are you asking me to go home? Order from above said you should go. You are a recruit, listen to me. No written letter. I went home by verbal instruction.
The strong stigma and the fear of death consumed her. She then decided to end it all immediately.
Life became so difficult for me now. I have nothing to lay my hand on. My work has been taken away from me. Now, calls to disturb me with others. So I concluded that let me take my life. A few days later, I prepared my own concoction, which I will not disclose. I prepared my own concoction. I took it. Yes, I did. I did took it. Just want to leave this world and be free. So I took it, but I went to sleep. Nothing happened. If not today that I'm telling you, no one knew I tried taking medication to kill myself because I was tired of this life.
But after this failed attempt at suicide, her life took another turn. A radio show on HIV on Joy FM will be the trigger for her open disclosure of her status and her new life as an HIV ambassador.
I think 2007, I was in Odoko that long bus, and in Joy FM, Joy FM was discussing about HIV on a very negative manner, which I got angry in the car. I took my phone and then called and then blasted them about how they were saying. In fact, the way they were discussing it looks as if everybody that gets HIV being immoral and stuff. So that is why I attacked them. But I was on my way going to the Deba. So when I got to the Deba, our then president wanted someone to disclose to the public for people to know that if you have HIV, you don't look that sick that people think. Everybody refused. And I don't know, I was just carried from the chair and I moved to the podium and I spoke. And I finished doing it before I realized that I did something. So when I did, somebody was among the crowd, spotted me, and then came to me and said, asked of my name, I mentioned my name, you go a bit good, you'll be a good material. I didn't understand what the person said. In 2010, I was there when Ghana AIDS Commission called me that they would like to engage me in ambassadorial work. In fact, it was a bit tough for me because I standing on TV saying this, looking at my daughter being in SHS, my family, I started thinking a lot. But I said, no, I have to do something for myself. So I consulted my daughter because she was my fear. If people start stigmatizing her, how will life be for her? I consulted her. My daughter told me, Mom, if that is the only thing that will make you happy, go ahead. He said, what about school? He said, I can finish them. Then I went to my kid brother. I told my kid brother, I said, sister, if that is the only thing that will make you happy, go ahead. I went to my priest. I said, they all spoke the same language as if they had meeting. So if these three people said go ahead, then they are God the Father, Son, and the Holy Spirit. So they gave me vim. So when I went back to the commission, I said, okay, I'm ready to do it. And that is why I came out openly now to tell the whole world that I am living with HIV.
Gifty has since then dedicated her life to the work of advocacy, encouraging people living with HIV to live and achieve their full potential, especially women. She would later find love again in the place she was initially shunned, her church.
And of course, be sure to watch the full feature, which airs later tonight on Joy Prime on the Joy News channel. Now, the Youth Employment Agency, YEA, has announced a 40% increase on the allowances of community policing assistants. The announcement was made by the Deputy Chief Executive Officer Operations of the YEA, Alhaji Bashir Ibrahim, at the passing out ceremony of some 1,125 community police assistants at the National Training School here in Accra. There's more in the following report.
Inform you, all of you, that based on consultation, he has increased your allowance by 40%. Government has indeed given us the needed resources to pay your allowances regularly. You will get it timelessly. To whom much is given, thank you, God bless you. The Youth Employment Agency has a responsibility, as I said earlier, to create jobs for young people. And I want to take this opportunity to announce to the media that before the end of 2023, our commitment is to create 35,700 jobs. 35,700 jobs. 2 months ago, we recruited community health workers, 6,000 of them. They have been deployed in our various KIPS compounds across the country. They are working. And indeed, they will be taking their first pay at the end of this month. As I speak to you, we are doing 2,000 prison office assistants. The first batch is currently at Anchor 4 in the central region, equally going through vigorous training. Next week, they will equally pass out. We will be doing 15,000 community policing assistants, and you happen to be the first batch of 5,000. The reason why you are not going through the normal 3 weeks training is because many of you have gone through the process already, and we believe that you needed some just refresher courses to update yourself. And that is the more reason why you are doing just some few weeks or 1.5 weeks. As I speak, we'll also be doing 3,000 youth and fire service. Last week, the CEO signed an MOU with a German company called ENSAC, where the company has outsourced to the Youth Employment Agency to recruit 700 young artisans in this country. I'm sure those of you from Central Region, you are familiar with the Kung Fu factory. The Kung Fu factory that is supposed to produce juice, we are having an MOU with them. We also have the sugar factory, where we also have another MOU. We want to support these 2 factories to grow, and young people will be employed. This government is committed to ensuring that in the midst of difficulties, young people are not left out. And that is why His Excellency Nana Addo Dankwa Akufo-Addo and his able Vice President Dr. Mahmoud Bawumia, they have charged the Youth Employment Agency management to ensure that even though we are going through some turbulence, we should not allow the young people to stay home unemployed. And we have taken up that challenge, and we will live up to that challenge.
And now the grand finale of Joy Prime's cooking reality show, Big Chef, happened at the weekend with young Fudela winning or emerging as Ghana's biggest kiddie chef. Here's a wrap of everything you missed.
It was a battle by kids, not with guns, but with cutlery sets. 14 contestants started the Big Chef Season 2 journey. But after 10 weeks of adrenaline-charged challenges, only 6 survived the heat in the kitchen. Amma, Ajua, Aram, Fudela, Prince and Laura to make history to be crowned champion of Big Chef Season 2. And now the final task.
Your task for today is to prepare a starter, a main and a dessert. Take into consideration the sponsoring companies.
It's showtime freestyle cooking contest. Contestants are to prepare mouth-watering 3-course meal within 60 minutes. Oh yes, they are all up to the task in displaying their culinary skills, and with amazing products from sponsors, you can only expect delicious meals. The contestants had massive support from their family, friends and fan base. And when the kitchen became tensed, there was a melodious voice to calm their nerves.
And every good things we do is for tomorrow. Then let's start some life for tomorrow.
Stepping at the yard, for me, it's a Friday night. When we drop in this party, people got your eyes all on me. Stepping at the yard, everybody's watching movies.
Finalists are done with their cooking and ready for tasting and judging. The judges were impressed with all the meals presented by the contestants.
I'm a picky eater, so yeah, and that was the first time I was tasting octopus, and it really did the work for me. Yeah, good job.
The spice, the flavors. Thank you. Actually, I really like the flavor, so there's a flavor for me with this one.
Yeah, that's good.
With fortune rice.
Good job.
The voting and judges' scores have been collated, and the fate of all now in hand. Unfortunately, the two sisters, Ajwa and Amma, took 5th and 6th positions respectively. The only boy remaining in the competition, Prince, placed 4th. Aram fought hard and became 2nd runner-up. And now, Laura and Fudela, who is the champion of the Big Chef Season 2.
Ghana's next biggest kiddie chef is Fudela Abbas.
Fudela took home a cash prize of 10,000 Ghana cedis, a certificate, refrigerator, stove, and amazing products from sponsors, as well as the bragging right as the best kid chef in Ghana.
Thank you.
And we say congratulations going out to young Fudela. Who knows, you may be the next winner of Season 3. You need to encourage the young ones to also be a part of Big Chef. But that's all we have for you here on The Pulse. I'm Blessed Sogah. Log on to myjoyonline.com. We have updates there for you. We'll see you again tomorrow.